Crime is everywhere and constantly on the rise. Quick and easy cases are solved daily, but what about those more sinister and cold cases that remain to be solved? Join Ashley Marino as she dives into the horror of some of these cases and sheds some light on what is truly behind the realm of darkness. Here is your host, Ashley Marino.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Realm of Darkness. I am super excited about tonight's show. So, my guest tonight is a best-selling author in several different genres, with everything from true crime to her popular history and haunting series that have been spotlighted all over different media forums, such as radio and TV. But however, tonight we're going to be discussing one of today's most popular murder cases that has made headlines all over the country and happens to be the topic of her very new book called The Countdown to Murder, Alex Murdaugh. And of course, we're going to get into the dirty details and the suspicious deaths and everything that surrounds the Murdaugh family. So will everyone please help me welcome Rebecca Pittman.
Hi, Ashley. How are
Hello.
you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
So once I heard that this book was released, I had to reach out because Alex Murdaugh is one of those cases that it baffles me. It baffles me in so many different ways, different aspects. So let's just get right into it. Tell me everything about what made you want to write about it, what interested you about the case, all of it.
Well, I think like everyone else, we have all just watched this thing stupefied. It's beyond fiction. It kept evolving, which made it very hard to write the book. The book is 703 pages.
Yes.
And it's packed with photos and maps and interviews, but I'd be writing it right after the trial ended, and every day was breaking news, and I'm trying to write it. And I'm going, no more breaking news.
Yeah.
But, and it's still doing that every day. While I was writing, they had the exhumation of Stephen Smith and a new autopsy. I had to go back and change elements of that I'd already written. But I think everybody right now is waiting for the outcome of Stephen Smith's new investigation. But next month, we have the boat crash case finally going to trial for a civil case. So it's still exploding. But you can't look away from this. It's just an amazing, sad, tragic tale. And it was one of those that I thought, I have to write this.
Yes, and it's a great topic. And for anybody who doesn't know the case, who might be living under a rock, we'll say, who is Alex and why is he so, we'll say, famous and rich and powerful? What got him to that status?
He comes from a long line of South Carolina solicitors. A solicitor is the equivalent of our public defender, our prosecuting attorneys, defending attorneys. So basically, they ruled South Carolina's Low Country. It went back almost 100 years, and it was passed down from Murdaugh to Murdaugh to Murdaugh. And by the time it got to Alex, pretty much they had everybody in their pocket. They had law enforcement, they had judges, they had pathologists, and they were getting away with pretty much anything they wanted to, which is sad. But at that time, they had acquired so much power that the insurance companies that they went after just pretty much said, never mind, just hand them the money. They're going to win because they pretty much ruled the area. And a jury from Hampden County, where this all takes place, typically voted or was in favor of any case a Murdaugh put before them. One way or another, they buttered a lot of bread in that area and had everybody essential on their side, and a lot of things got swept under the rug.
That's incredible. I mean, and like you said, the juries that would kind of side with them, it might have been out of fear that something would happen to them, or that they would kind of be like excommunicated from the community or looked down upon. And now the Murdaugh family consists of Alex, Maggie, Paul, and Buster, correct?
That immediate family, yes.
And those are kind of the ones that all of this start to kind of form around. Because from my understanding, and for anybody that might, like I said, might not know, technically Maggie and Paul's murder is not the first one to kind of be revolved around this family and have ties to certain individuals.
Correct. Everybody believes that the boat crash in 2019 that killed Mallory Beach was the catalyst. It shone the spotlight on a lot of things. And because Paul Murdaugh, Alex's youngest son, was drunk and at the wheel, it became a very big deal. And not just that, but a beautiful young 19-year-old girl was thrown from the boat when he hit the pilings of a bridge doing almost 30 miles an hour. Wow. I went out with the Beaufort Search and Rescue that were on the scene that night. They were kind enough to take me out last year. When they floored that thing, when they put that throttle over to 30 miles an hour, you don't realize how powerful that is on the water. You are literally, I was thrown forward. I couldn't see. You feel the loss of control. And then picture someone at the wheel that is completely drunk with 3 times over the legal limit of alcohol. And he hits the pilings, and Mallory and her boyfriend Anthony are thrown from the boat, as well as Paul. But just due to split timing, Mallory hits a piling. Anthony sails past it, and so does Paul. And Mallory has a traumatic head injury and drowns, and they didn't find her for a week.
Wow.
So it's just one of those tragic stories. But when that happened, all of a sudden, here came all of these people saying, you need to look into Stephen Smith's death from 2015. You need to take another look at Gloria Satterfield's death from 2018. So it was the boat crash that put the spotlight on the Murdaughs and other things that people thought they'd been getting away with.
And that's crazy, because with the boat crash, I know that I had read that that Alex Murdaugh was allowed down onto the boat. He was kind of allowed to see the evidence and what happened, but they wouldn't let Mallory's family down there. And was that because
actually Maggie
that they let
Maggie and Alex's father that they let raise the tape and said go on down, but they had already told the Beaches, Mallory's parents, stay over by the car. They were begging, we just want to go down by the water and see what's happening. We want to see where this is our daughter. No, you have to stay over there. And here came Maggie and Randolph, and they lifted the tape. I believe it was at that point possibly that Paul's clothes disappeared, because at some point during that boat ride while he was drunk, he stripped down to his boxers. And I know from the inventory and photos that his shirt was on the boat and his pants, etc. And I can just be, when they put him in the hospital with the other people on the boat, they put him in paper scrubs because he didn't have any clothes. I think Maggie, because they knew the officers, these were buddies. One of them was John Marvin Murdaugh's best friend, Alex's brother. His best friend was helping with the investigation. I think she got his clothes and probably said, hey, he doesn't have any other clothes. We're an hour away from home. Well, in that pants pocket was a wallet. And in that wallet was Maggie's credit card that he used to illegally buy alcohol. And in that wallet was the fake ID that he used of his brother's. And I think they wanted to make sure they got hold of that wallet.
And that right there is tampering with evidence.
Yes.
Because when they went to the hospital, I heard that, it didn't stop there. That, at the hospital, that there were other kids being blamed for driving, that they were trying to take the spotlight off of Paul and put it on another kid and try to blame him. And it just the extent that this family went to try to keep Paul out of trouble, it's crazy to me that they would risk the life of another, we'll say, teenager spending time in prison for something
Exactly.
their son did.
And it was Connor Cook who grew up with Paul. He was one of his best friends. Paul nicknamed him Cotton Top. And the minute Alex and Randolph Sr. get to the hospital, they go into damage control. They are telling the kids, don't talk to anybody. We'll handle it. I'm going to represent you now. I'll take care of it. Alex is going up and down the halls, going in and out of rooms. The hospital staff could not contain him. They said, you need to stay in your son's room. He'd pop back out. He's on the phone. And he told them basically, don't say anything. He told their parents, don't say anything. I'll take care of it. And suddenly they started getting the feeling like something's wrong here. And Connor started thinking, I'm getting thrown under the bus. He actually heard Paul tell his dad on the phone Cotton Top was driving. And so it little by little started dawning on him. And then Alex gives Connor's father an attorney whose name we've become very well familiar with, which is Corey Fleming. So they were already ready to do it again and give him an attorney that would keep him reined in. And yeah, it's exactly what you said, Ashley. This kid would have been gone to prison for 20 to 30 years. His life would have been ruined, and they didn't care.
No, just to save face of what Paul did and to try to save the Murdaugh name, which,
yes.
Again, I mean, like I said, this whole case is baffling to me. And poor Mallory's family and poor Mallory, the parents, I have to give them a lot of props for holding it together and not losing it, because hearing someone blame my child for something they didn't do, that could have I probably would have been set off by that, but his family staying calm and keeping him calm, and it shows what kind of parents they are. But it shows what kind of conniving manipulator Alex truly was.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of the family had been brought up to believe the law doesn't pertain to you. And Buster and Paul, Alex's sons, were very much raised with, it doesn't pertain to you. There was the year before the boat crash, Paul was in a pickup truck with his girlfriend, Morgan, who was also on the boat that night, drunk, rolled the truck into a ditch with them in it. She crawls out, calls 911, and Paul starts yelling at her, what did you do that for? And here comes, immediately within minutes, here comes Maggie and his grandfather Randolph. And the first thing they did, they didn't ask the kids, are you okay? They started removing guns and beer cans from the truck before the police could get there. And Randolph's yelling at Morgan, why did you call 911? So these kids were raised to believe they could get away with anything. And unfortunately, it just kept perpetuating traumatic things, loss of life, cover-ups. And it's a tragic story all the way around.
Well, and that makes me think about Stephen Smith, who you mentioned earlier. Is he technically was the first murder, we'll say murder, that's kind of tied to the family. And they tried to say it was a hit and run, correct?
Yes.
But he had ties to Buster. And with you mentioning that these kids were raised with no consequences, it makes me wonder if Buster had something to do with it.
Well, here's the thing, and we're all being careful at this point. I know that everyone has their beliefs on what happened until it is put before a court of law. They're rumors at this point.
Yes.
However, during the interviews for the book, I was blessed to meet some incredible people who did not want to go on the record with their names. I don't blame them. They live there. They have to continue to live there. And the one had connections that I understood implicitly why this person could not have their name attached to it. But what she did give me was new evidence that I turned over to SLED, which is the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. And it seems that it involves a gate that was crashed in that night. And this had never been brought forward before. I received a hand-drawn map. This gate was right up the street from where Stephen's car was found. And now we have two people that we believe were there that night with broken trucks. We have a young man named Sean Connolly who said that he hit something that night and that his side view mirror was broken. But I also interviewed one of Gloria Satterfield's close acquaintances who told me the day after Stephen's murder, Gloria, who was their housekeeper for over 20 years, went to this person, very upset, and said Buster turned his truck in for repairs the day Stephen died. So you've got a lot of things going on. They did come right out and admit that they did subpoena Sean Connolly and his friend Patrick Wilson. Those names are out there, so I'm okay saying them. The grand jury brought them in, and they're saying now there's 4 or 5 people of interest, not necessarily suspects, but witnesses who knew something. And so I'm very anxious to see when it comes out, the grand jury's findings, if that gate is indeed mentioned, because I kind of went out on a limb here and put it in the book, but I totally trust this person and what they told me.
Well, and with that accident, I know that they said it was a hit and run, but they said that some of the injuries and the lacerations just didn't match up to a hit and run.
Correct.
And that it was more consistent with almost like a beating with a blunt object, maybe a bat, a lead pipe, or something similar to that. In your research, do you feel that that's more accurate than maybe a hit and run?
Oh, yes. In fact, SLED came right out and they've ruled out a hit and run. They're calling it a homicide. Of course, a hit and run, if you die, is a homicide, in my opinion.
True.
But they're making it look more deliberate. Eric Bland is Sandy Smith, Stephen's mother's attorney. He has received now the new autopsy reports. This is pretty recent, a couple of weeks ago. And he is saying they don't believe now that it was a baseball bat that caused the injuries. And they are saying that they are pretty firm that Stephen died in the road where he was found. I don't have a problem with that. And again, I'm going out on a limb here, but it's in the book. So I think he was struck initially somewhere else. And I don't think that killed him. And I think that when they brought him to the road, I saw puncture wounds in the back of his head from the 1 or 2 photos I did see.
Wow.
And the other one is a huge laceration that goes 7 inches up across his forehead. But he was also beaten in the back of the head. And the new autopsy is now showing that, where for the longest time, we believed it was just that one hit. So that kind of rules out a hit and run right there. You're not getting hit first in the head and turn around and get hit again in the back. So I believe the initial hit was probably the front one, which stunned him or knocked him out completely. And then when they threw him in the middle of the street, I think those wounds may have opened up and he bled out there. There is a lot of blood at that scene. And so, yes, I agree. He died there. I don't think that's where the initial blow was. And I could be proven totally wrong. But they are now kind of backing away from the baseball bat.
Wow. And for somebody to have to experience something like that is traumatic and terrible and awful. And I know in one of the documentaries, they did mention that a witness came forward and mentioned that Stephen had called Buster that night claiming that his car had broken down and that Buster and 3 friends went to go pick him up. Did you find any truth to that claim?
No. That doesn't mean it isn't possible. They did finally break into Stephen's phone and got text messages and so forth. I'm not saying it didn't happen. In all of the police reports, it did not show that he actually got a call. It's a rumor. We don't know that yet.
Hopefully that's something that they can figure out in court. But you mentioned something very interesting to me. when you said that Stephen Smith's death and that Gloria was upset and had mentioned to somebody that Buster's truck was taken in, and then it wasn't shortly after that, just a few years,
Right.
where Gloria ends up accidental death.
Correct.
Where they claim that she was coming up the stairs of the front of the house, tripped over dogs, fell and hit her head. And, there were some witnesses that mentioned that the dogs were locked up and they were never out. But it is interesting that those two cases are once again tied together and Gloria
Yes.
ends up dead.
Well, okay. Again, and I could go up in flames with some of, but I trust my sources. I
Yes.
really vetted all of them, and they were very nervous to do it themselves, and they were happy that I came along because they wanted that information put
Mhm.
out there. They just didn't want their name on it.
Yeah, you gave them a safe outlet.
Yeah, and they're my friends today, and I treasure that more than the book, is the friendships I made. But this same person who was incredibly close to Gloria said, Gloria never used the front stairs. She used the side entrance. That morning that she fell, her truck was being worked on by her brother, just maintenance. And she had borrowed her sister's car and was supposed to be going to work, not to go pick up a check, not to just stop real quick. And if you listen to the groundskeeper, Ronnie Freeman, he said it was 8:30 in the morning. He was working on something. He said she drove in as usual, and he watched her get out of the car to go up the steps. She had her purse over one shoulder and was carrying her big cup of whatever drink she typically carried. So he's making it sound like this is an everyday thing, that she was coming to work. And now you've got Ronnie also saying that 15 minutes later, so we're talking now 8:45, that Maggie called him in a panic and said, get up here quick. Well, she didn't call 911 till 9:24.
Yeah.
So if he's called to the steps at 8:45, why in the world, what are we doing until 9:24?
And why was 911 not the first call?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. The whole thing about calling Alex is a lie. The time that she called him, and this is something I'm kind of proud of, because everybody was going back and forth. Was Alex actually there before the EMS arrived? I mean, she lied about when she called him. He lied about when he got there. So while I was listening to the 911 call that Maggie makes, that she starts getting flustered with this dispatcher because she keeps repeating things, and she's already said, ma'am, she's unconscious. And then the dispatcher says, well, can you take your phone down there and let me ask her some questions? And she's already told her twice she can't talk. And frankly, I don't blame her. By then I'd have been getting flustered. But you hear her say to someone, I called an ambulance. Well, Paul's right there. He's down there trying to help her at the bottom of the stairs. So it wasn't him. He already knows they're on the phone to 911. And then this is the part, and you can listen for yourself. Right when she gives up with the operator, before she hands the phone to Paul, there's about 30 seconds, and you hear these voices in the background, and it's a male voice. And I can't tell what he says, but then you hear Paul say, we didn't give her anything. And then you hear Alex distinctly say, good. I went, oh my gosh.
That's the same reaction I just
exactly
had.
what time he's there. It's like 9:27, somewhere in there. So you know exactly when he showed up. And I'm thinking, why did he ask him if they gave her anything? Now, as a personal injury attorney, he knows that you don't give anybody with a head injury even an aspirin. It could exacerbate. Was it that? Or did he mean what details did they give the dispatcher? And Paul said, we didn't give her anything. And he said, good, and started spinning the dogs tripped her. But I was so excited because nobody had mentioned hearing that, and you can hear it for yourself right before Paul says hello. Isn't that interesting?
That that is very interesting. And the question that he asked, because I mean, you said that she clearly stated that this woman was unconscious, which means that they couldn't have given her a medication orally. And technically, you're not allowed to inject anything into someone who cannot give you consent. So he had to be talking about some type of detail or evidence that could, get them into trouble.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. And he did say when he talked to Alex, when he talked to the insurance investigator to get his hands on the money, he said that she started throwing up and that he and Paul set her up. And I don't know if the throwing up prompted him to say, did you give her anything? Maybe. I don't know, but I was thrilled to know, nailed it. That's exactly when he showed up. And it was him that you hear Maggie saying, I called an ambulance. So there's so many lies about when he got there and when she called him, and why all the lies? And now he's admitted that the dogs didn't trip her. That makes it very suspicious, even if it was just to get the insurance money. And I'll tell you, the last one that jumped out at me was Maggie, when she talked to the insurance investigator, said she went to see Gloria in the hospital 5 times. And this is the part that just hit me between the eyes. She goes, but I was never alone. I thought, who says that? And she did it again. She said, I did go to see her, but I was never alone.
That makes me wonder, what did you do to her in the room? What did you do to shut her up?
Exactly. And she died the day after they moved her out of ICU. It's almost like as soon as she wasn't protected anymore by monitors and people coming and going, and she was doing better. This same person that I interviewed went to see her every day, treasured her, loved her to death. And her legs were starting to move and she was starting to talk. She told her sister the night before she died, I love you too. An orderly walked in, and Gloria's friend said, look at her legs. We're going to do this. We're going to walk out of here. And the orderly said, it looks like she wants to go right now. And the next morning she's dead.
And see, and that makes me wonder about that insurance money, because something odd about that case is that, and I had never heard this before until Alex, is that after her death, he sued himself,
right,
for a wrongful death on the property, and he won.
Right.
And was it a large amount of money? Because I could never find exactly how much money he did win in that lawsuit, but I found it very odd that he would sue himself, offer her family money, and then pay for nothing but the funeral cost. Where did the rest of that money go?
There were 2 insurance policies. The Lloyd's of London was the smaller one, and it was for $500,000. And here's the thing, unless Lloyd's paid out the full amount, he couldn't go after the big fish, which was Nautilus, which was over $4 million. So he actually badgered, he and his attorney, Corey Fleming, again, went after Nautilus and threatened him basically. And they paid the full amount. So now he goes to, Lloyd's of London. So now he goes to Nautilus and has Corey Fleming, his buddy, his college roommate, his buddy, his pal, sue him, and they win. And all that money was supposed to go to Gloria's sons. And the part that ripped me up was, while this is going on, these 2 kids who were living in a trailer with Gloria, she was the breadwinner, they're getting evicted out of the trailer because their mother's dead. There's no money coming in, and they're begging Alex, have you heard anything yet about the money? He goes, no, but it's progressing. He'd already gotten it 2 months before.
And he couldn't give them.
He didn't give them a dime. They're telling him the medical bills are coming in. They're panicking, and he didn't give them a dime. I mean, I interviewed one of Gloria's sons, Brian, who just touched my heart. There's no malice in these two young men.
Mhm.
They're wonderful, kind people, and yet he would start crying during different parts of the interview because he still missed her so much. It rips you up.
I can only imagine. And for them to still have such pure souls and good hearts after what Alex did to their mother and then
Yeah.
ultimately them. I mean, for them to get evicted and he couldn't even give them a few $1,000s out of 4
Yeah.
million, almost 4.5 million. He's a
Yeah.
selfish individual. I'm sorry for if I make anybody angry, but he is selfish.
Oh,
And
I don't think selfish cuts it close. I
with
would have used a stronger word.
I
So
I was going to, but I figured we might get we might get in trouble on the air.
it's a family show.
But and with some of the things that Gloria knew, because they said that Alex also had kind of a pill addiction and that he was struggling with that, and Gloria was aware of that, and that Gloria might have kind of been savvy to the fact that they didn't really have as much money as they claimed they did. And then her being upset about Steven, I wonder if it was a combination of things, but just all of the facts lead to not accidental.
Well, I have to agree with that mainly because of what happened afterward. Again, that haunted me that Maggie
Mhm.
both times said, and I was never alone with her. You know, usually it would be, oh, yeah, Paul and I would go check on it. But to
Mhm.
say that twice, I was never alone with her. And then the death certificate said that the tracheal tube was pushed back into her throat. And that there was one other thing that was a monitor or an arterial vein thing was off or was, and the report said, but those were rectified. And I thought, how in the world does that get pushed back into someone's throat? So I don't know. Yeah, my mind goes that way, but I don't know who would make sure you knew twice that you didn't go by yourself to see her. That's just really odd to me.
When it's almost like a confession without really giving a
Yeah.
confession. And I mean, it is all still rumor at this point, but for you to make that point, it's almost like a little kid when they're in trouble. They're like, I didn't get in the cookie jar,
Yeah.
mommy. I didn't get in the cookie jar. And then all the cookies are missing.
Yeah.
It's making sure somebody, I don't know. It's very, very interesting to me just
Well,
how
you've also
they,
got the fact that there was no autopsy done and the coroner was never notified. And I interviewed Angie Topper, who was the brave coroner that came out at the time, deputy coroner, or she was actually the coroner, and said, something's wrong here. I never got the case. It wasn't sent over to me. I should know about every death that happens in a hospital. I got nothing. And she actually sent a letter to the FBI and to other people saying there's something wrong here. And she lost her position. She did not get reelected. Her whole life was ruined because of this. She's picked herself up and she's got another coroner position now, but it was just devastating to her. She basically got blackballed by the Murdaughs, and a lot of things happened. I was so grateful for her interview, but for a coroner to say something's wrong here, I think carries a lot of weight.
and somebody should listen. And there's just so many things about this case that, like I said, just baffle me that they got away with so many different things, and that people were just so willing to push things under the rug. And then for the murders of Maggie and Paul,
Mhm.
even some of those details just don't line up. And you know, I could probably get hate for this, but I do not believe that there was one shooter.
Oh,
I
you
think
don't?
I do not. I do not. Just some of the things that and now I did not have the pleasure of doing the investigation and the interviews that you did. So that's why I'm excited to to jump into some of the details to get your opinion on it is, with them being on acres and acres of land. When Alex initially made that phone call, he sounded winded and not upset. Almost, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't feel like he sounded like a typical spouse or parent that had just lost two of their family members. And some of the things that kind of get me is, how can you shoot two people that quickly at that closer range and not one of them turn around and get shot on the side or in the front? Was there a silencer on the gun? If he was there as quickly as he said, how did he not see something? How did he not run into somebody with that much? It would have taken them a while to get away. And there's just, my head is spinning with the details that just don't line up.
Well, okay, I put in the book a chapter called "Was Paul Murdaugh Supposed to Die?" I think there's evidence to show he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maggie was the target. But what interests me a lot are the markers for the bullets. There's a marker number 13 that's right outside the feed room door where Paul was shot. It's a bullet that went into the gravel and broke up. And yet during the trial, they didn't do anything with it. And to me, it's right outside the feed room door. It shows to me that there was something went wrong. Why are you shooting into the ground? It looks to me like some kind of struggle. The first shot into Maggie's thigh actually exited her thigh and shot through the hanger. And I'm thinking, if you're in control of an AR-15 and the best you can do is shoot her in the thigh, and you're only 2 to 3 feet away, to me, it looks like there is something going on. I believe that, okay, we hear Alex on the video, the kennel video, and we hear him yelling for Bubba and that he goes off to get him. What first alerted me to something's funny going on here was Dick Harpootlian's wording when they first announced that this video had been found, which was late. It was late in the game. It was April of 2022. And he said, you hear Alex talking to Maggie. It's a friendly conversation. Paul's having a good time. I thought he separated them. Why didn't he just say Alex and Maggie and Paul were talking? He didn't. He separated them. Alex is talking to Maggie. Paul's having a good time. And that's the first inkling I had was, did he even know Paul was there? And so during the trial where Alex says he finally admitted to going down there in the golf cart, he parked up by the feed shed. Well, Paul was like 5 kennels down inside there. It was already getting dark, looking at Rogan's dog and taking that video. He doesn't ever talk to Alex. He talks to Maggie, who is standing right there. You hear the hose turn on. I think she started washing out the 2 cages while the 2 dogs were running. And she goes, he's got a chicken or a guinea hen, a guinea. And Paul says, it's a chicken. But he says it really low. And I don't know if Alex thought he was there. Judging by the steps he took, I think Paul walked down after dinner. And Alex, during the first several interviews, said, I don't know where he went after dinner. I thought he was somewhere around the house. He takes the golf cart down there to shoot Maggie, who he knows is running the dogs. And I think she was getting ready to head back to Edisto Beach. And it's getting dark. In the video, you can see it's getting dark. The water's running, so he can't hear Paul. The hose is gushing, which he would have been right next to. He runs after the dog. She gets finished, goes to check her cell phone message. And that's when Paul's through with the video, but he can't get it to send because the signal won't work right there. He takes those few steps, goes into the feed room where the signal was probably better. He's down to 2% on his battery. So Alex has circled the hangar and he's coming back around to where he last saw Maggie, which was in front of the 2 pens. And as he passes that feed room door, I think he does one of these and Paul is looking at him and either Maggie screamed or said something, or he sees the gun in his dad's hand and he reaches and grabs his own shotgun. And I think it was leaning against the wall. He grabbed it by the barrel And as he goes to shoulder it, I think Alex grabbed it, and when he did, it went off, which is that weird wound right across his
Mhm.
chest, out under his left arm, and out the window. Now Maggie's screaming and running toward him and pulling on him. And by now, Paul has made it to the front door of the shed. He's wounded. He's dripping blood. His head and shoulder are halfway out the door. And I think when Maggie's fighting for the gun, it went off again and blew his head off.
Oh,
And at this point, you've got bullets flying everywhere, which is telling me that's why there's a bullet shot that went into the gravel, and why he only shot her in the thigh. I think she's still wrestling with him. And I mean, these shots are ridiculous for someone that hunts all the time. He just needed one shot to the head
Mhm.
or the heart, and he shoots her 4 times, possibly 5. So to me, this looked like a chaotic scene. And I think Paul was not supposed to die that night. And I've got other reasons in the book why I think that. But the trial didn't come to that conclusion. So it's
And
just mine.
yeah, and I mean, yeah, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I know a lot of people ask, well, why would he kill Maggie if she was so on board with covering up a lot of these things and the insurance fraud, but it came out that she was possibly filing for divorce, and maybe that had something to do with it, and then the fact that maybe she knew that he was laundering money and the insurance fraud that had happened and all of those different situations. But I don't know for some reason, and of course, I don't know the details like you do, but for Buster to be so on Alex's side, something in me says that he knew, maybe not Paul, but he knew Maggie was going to die that night.
That
'Cause
would be a tough one. I mean, that's your mother. I don't know. That I honestly, I've listened to the jailhouse phone calls, and most of the time Buster sounds put out that Alex is calling him. I don't sense warmth. I think out of
really?
duty, he was there at the trial every day. The more recent calls coming out, he is out and out blunt. I can't talk to you right now. I respect your opinion because I don't know either. So you could be
Yeah.
totally right.
But no, I'm glad you said that because, the media, they can really twist things and make things look a way that maybe they aren't. And with Buster, they do make him look like he is his dad's puppet and he is right by his dad's side supporting every movement. And that was something that I struggled with. I'm like, how can you be so on board and so supportive of your father when there's evidence that he just killed your mother and your brother? And that's where my mind was going, as well, maybe he knew this was going to happen, maybe he was going to help him cover it up. But with you saying that, the media is not showing that, so
Yeah,
they're
well,
almost playing him to be.
yeah, I don't think there were 2 shooters. And here's the thing with Paul, and again, I'm thinking only Alex was involved. He had an AR-15. Paul's in the shed. That thing is this tiny little room. It's basically shooting fish in a barrel. It would have taken 1 shot to the head. And instead, you have these 2 clumsy shotgun blasts at a really odd level, like the guns clear down by your ankle. That doesn't make any sense to me. If he was a target, he would have shot him. And I don't know. I think something went very, very wrong right there at the feed room door.
See, and that's sad because Paul was 20, correct? I mean, I know that he was young, he was a baby.
Yeah, he was
I
22 when he died, I believe.
22 when he died. See, and that's young. And I mean, not that killing anybody at any age is appropriate, but that kid had his whole life ahead of him, and for the selfishness of Alex to do that to his wife and his kid is just, it's a sad, sad case. And I don't even know, because I know there are still people out there that are kind of defending him and saying he had nothing to do with it and he's this incredible guy, and that the murders were targeted by somebody in Mallory's family, which is almost disgusting to me. Like, that family's been through enough. Please leave them alone, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm very interested to see how the Stephen case comes along, and to see how Mallory's case comes along. Having closure for those families would be incredible.
Well, it's a long time coming. When I interviewed Sandy Smith, she touched my heart. I laughed with her. I cried with her. The stories she told me about Stephen were absolutely, the kid's wit was off the charts. I was just bent over laughing, and the memories she has of him. You've got these two vibrant young people that are gone based on someone else's selfishness. They just decided, your life doesn't matter to me. I'm going to get drunk and drive the boat, or I'm going to hit you with something and take you out. It's just the audaciousness of it, the narcissism, the entitlement. It makes you angry. It made me angry. I had a hard time writing parts of the book.
Yeah, and to see people like that in power too. I mean, to see the influence that they had on that community in that area, and so many people were willing to just do whatever they said. And now, was it out of fear, or was it out of loyalty and true friendship? I guess we will never truly know. But one of the things with you is, you gave people that safe outlet to talk about their stories, to tell, what they see, what they know, and all those details coming into the book, and being pushed forward into the cases. It's going to change these cases for the better. I mean, it's going to hopefully give, like I said, these families closure that they've been waiting so many years for.
Well, I'll tell you, I felt handicapped going into this because I live in Colorado. I went there to South Carolina. I went out on the search and rescue boat. I went to all the places. I interviewed people, and I got shot down by a few locals, basically saying, "You don't even live here. What right do you have?" And I thought, do you realize how many true crime books are written by people who don't live there?
Mhm.
And a few of them gave me 1-star reviews and very hateful reviews for the book, just to shoot me down, which was really hurtful because I worked so hard on this book. But I wondered, is that why maybe, though, that some of these people talked to me? I felt safe. I wasn't local. I was clear over in Colorado. And I don't know if that played a part or not, but I appreciate their bravery and their trust in me more than I can say.
Well, and I think you're right. I think you being almost an outsider made them more comfortable, because you don't live in that community. You're not going to have that influence of the Murdaugh family or their friends. So
Right.
you were taking the truth and putting it into this book. And I think anybody listening needs to grab this book and read it, because you do put so many details and so much information into it that the media either left out or twisted. And
Thank you.
there's so many things in your hard work. You can see it. I mean, just by reading the book. And everybody, you can grab it on Amazon. I double checked today that you can still get it before I told everybody. But truly, it is a great book. And like I said, you bring the details and you bring the truth, and you put it in a way that makes us understand it and believe it, versus the media, where it's trying to just twist this into a frenzy.
Well, this is the second in the Countdown to Murder series. The first one was Countdown to Murder Pam Hupp, who's a serial killer housewife out of St. Louis. And I thought, I will never find another story like this. And then along came Alec Murdaugh.
Yes.
So it's Countdown to Murder, Alec Murdaugh. And I am excited to see what all comes from it. We even had a remote viewing group send in their psychic impressions they were getting about Stephen's murder, and it blew my mind. They were so dead on so many things, and they didn't know what case we were even talking about. So I did put that in the book, and I think it's rather chilling.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because a little birdie told me that you do have a remote viewing project that you're working on. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about it and what we have to look forward to?
Well, it was Michelle Freed came to me. She is my publicist, and she helps me with publicity and setting up shows and so forth. And she said, "Do you know I have a remote viewing group?" And I'd always been fascinated by it. I know the CIA uses it, the military. I was told the Russians have used it to spy on us. But all you do is, I was only allowed to give her 2 questions. I was not allowed to say who it was, the gender, the location, nothing. I just said, I want to know the location and anything you see happening around it to the suspect or to the victim. That's all I gave her. She had no idea the case I was working on, none of it. It could have been a 40-year-old woman in a New York townhome murder. And they came back with South Carolina, a young man between 15 and 20, and Stephen was 19 at the time, that he was blindsided and struck. The one that got to me was the one said, "I am looking," and this was given to me in February of this year. Keep that in mind. She said, "I am looking down psychically, and I see a newspaper with 2 headlines, the word cracking." When I saw that, I put it away, but April came along, and here came a release, an article from SLED, 2 lines, SLED cracks Stephen Smith's phone. And cracks was in quotes. And then it said, "Rape kit still missing." So you've got the 2 lines, you've got cracks, although she said cracking. I went, "Oh my gosh." And I ran in my office and got the report, and I showed it to my husband. I said, "There's no way this is an accident."
No.
And one of the rumors was that someone chased Stephen through the trees. One of them drew a stick figure dodging in and out of trees.
Wow.
It's in the book. There's even more, and something about a building with a metal roof. And I'm very excited to see if, when this report comes out from the grand jury, if any of that is in there.
And all of that just gave me goosebumps.
Yeah.
There's
no way, Ashley, that's a coincidence. Cracking, seriously, in quotes. It blew my mind.
That is incredible. That is absolutely incredible. Oh my gosh. I hate to say that our time is coming to an end, because I love every time that you're on the show. We always have these great conversations, and you write incredible books. And I'm serious, everybody, go to Amazon, go get the book. I promise you won't be disappointed. Leave a review for all those haters that are trying to shut it down. I think they're just upset.
It's all right. I understand the mentality, but it did hurt, because this book almost broke me. This was a hard one.
Yeah,
but
with all the different avenues.
Thank you for having me. You're a joy to talk to.
Well, thank you. And yes, thank you so much for being on the show. And I cannot wait to have you back and just continuously talking about all your books, because they're so amazing.
Thank you, sweetie. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. But yes, thank you so much. Everyone, I will be back next week. We'll be talking about infamous serial killers and how smart they are, some of their IQs, and if it's a correlation, if their IQ and these urges are correlations to some of the killings. So everyone, have a great night, and I will see you next week. And again, Rebecca, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTKDB.com.